Texas A&M pounds LSU. Are Brian Kelly's days numbered? We're talking about it. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below, so thank you sincerely for that. Where to begin? LSU loses to Texas A&M 49-25, a game that, quite honestly, I don't think many of us saw it coming, at least not to the degree in which it manifests. I picked Texas A&M to win the game, but I picked it 27-20. I thought we'd see a game where LSU defensively played well, like we've seen mostly this year, an LSU offense that failed to get on track, like we've seen mostly this year, and LSU lose the game, kind of like we saw mostly this year. What transpired in the second half, though, has everyone rightly asking questions about what direction this program is heading, because when losing is one thing. Losing in the manner in which you lost to Texas A&M is something that is wholly unacceptable and should cause everyone within the football organization to step back and evaluate everything and determine if this is in fact headed in the right direction as far as a program. Losses happen. Losses happen to everybody, to every team. Nobody's exempt. But to lose 49-25 in a game that you got so thoroughly outplayed and dominated is a real concern. So what I'd like to do, I'm quite certain that if you're here with us right now, and thank you for being here, you're less concerned with me running through game flow and what all transpired on Saturday, and more so the big picture questions as far as what a result like this against Texas A&M means for the LSU football program. So I do want to get to that. Just I'll very quickly go through the game because, quite honestly, this isn't going to take very long. Actually, I chart every play of the game, but once Texas A&M went up 35-18 in the third quarter, I put my pen down. I stopped taking notes. And, the first half, hard to think of it in these terms, but the first half went really well for LSU, relatively speaking. For the 12th straight game, LSU lost a coin toss, which is incredible. It's a literal coin toss. It's a 50-50. LSU's lost the toss in 12 straight games. So the A&M won the toss, deferred. LSU would punt on the opening possession. Karius Kern starting at left tackle, gave up a sack. Cassius Howell, no surprise there. True freshman starting at left tackle, best pass rusher in the league, got home against a freshman. Happens. A&M went right down the field and scored. 41-yard run by Marcel Reed. Deja vu. Exactly what happened a year ago. The inability, and a week ago against Diego Pavia. Inability to contain a rushing quarterback. You're down 7-0. But the Tigers respond. They go and Trey'Dez Green scored, and you're tied at 7. You give them the ball. They convert a 3rd and 8 with a 17-yard catch. 3rd and 7, 15-yard touchdown reception. They're up 14-7. So boom, boom, they've scored on their first 2 possessions of the game. But then things started to turn a little bit. After LSU punted, you got to stop. And not only did you get to stop, but you blocked their punt out of the end zone to pull within 14-9 on the safety. And you get the ball and you go 3 and out, and you got to kick to them, and they converted a 3rd and 7, and they with a 47-yarder all the way down to the 4-yard line. But then your defense made a play. AJ Halsey comes up with a pick, which was incredible, in the end zone, and the Tigers end up putting together a touchdown drive. Harlan Berry, a 7-yard touchdown run. Look, that drive was at the time the key point of the game where you come up with a big play in the end zone with the AJ Halsey interception, and then it looks like they're going to get a stop. But on 3rd and 18, they commit a personal foul. It extends your drive. The next play, you finally hit a deep ball to Barry Brown. The type of play we've seen LSU try to make all season long. The deep balls that they just have not been able to connect with. And it was a contested catch, and Barry Brown made a great catch, really one-handed with his arm pinned against his body and you're in business. You're down at the 17-yard line. Harlem Berry would score from the 7. The PAT would miss. You're up 15-14, and then you get another interception. What a play by Mansour Delane, a tip ball. Harold Perkins comes up with the interception. And at this point, vibes are immaculate, man. Tigers would settle for a field goal right there at the end of the first half. So you're up 18-14 at halftime. You've gotten exactly what you need. You got to pull an upset. You forced 2 turnovers. You've scored on special teams. You're winning the game. You're feeling confident. The crowd is in it. The rain has held off. Like, everything feels good at this point. You know, aside you've played a clean game aside from the couple of sacks that your tackles gave up. You know, you've hit the big plays. Harlem Berry, by the way, in the first half, averaging in his first start, averaging 7 yards a carry, averaging 7 yards a carry in the first half. Like, this is a formula that can win. Your defense is playing well. It's getting turnovers. You're running the football. Like, this is sustainable. But it wasn't sustainable. What happened in the third quarter is, I don't want to be, I always try to avoid hyperbole. I don't want to say it's the greatest this, the worst that, because there's always examples that you could argue are better or worse or whatever. The third quarter against Texas A&M might be the worst quarter of football of the Brian Kelly era. And I understand that's all context, because like, his first game he ever coached against Florida State was an unmitigated disaster. They played so poorly. The Tennessee game in 2022 in Tiger Stadium was awful. From the opening kickoff, where you fumbled on the opening kickoff. But given everything on the line, remember, this is a game where you understand you've already got 2 losses. You have championship aspirations, playoff aspirations. You got to run the table. It's a must win to get to 10-2. You're at home against A&M. You have a lead. You're playing for your lives. And you go out there, and the third quarter was just absolutely horrific. I don't know any other way to describe what transpired there. A&M gets the ball to start the second half. 9 plays, 56 yards. Marcel Reed touchdown. They're up 21-18. You get the ball in 3rd and 7, you get sacked. You go 3-and-out punt. They house the punt 79 yards for a touchdown. They're up 10. Your 4-point lead at half is now a 10-point deficit. Just like that. Halfway through the third quarter. On the kickoff return, you're holding, so you start that drive at your own 7-yard line. You end up punting. 52-yard punt, but there's an illegal formation, so you have to repunt. They muff it. You can't fall on it. They get it at midfield. Third quarter in a blink, and just like that, you went from up 18-14 at half to down 35-18, and it was curtains. The Aggies would pile on in the fourth quarter and end up winning the game 49-25. I don't know that there's anything good I can say. Halsey's interception, Delane's play in the first half to tip to Perkins for the interception. Harlem Berry in his first start was outstanding. But the flip side of it is then Harlem Berry, averaging 7 yards a carry in the first half, had 1 rushing attempt in the second half. It was the first offensive play of the second half for LSU. Berry ran for 3 yards, never touched the ball again. And you could say, well, Matt, LSU got blown out. That's true. But it wasn't always a blowout. At times where you needed to get your offense going, to make A&M sit on the sideline and watch, to bleed clock, to sustain a drive. The guy that was averaging 7 yards a carry never touched the football. And that's Joe Sloan. And that's a giant problem. And it's been a problem. It's not that LSU can't run the football. I'm going to say this again. It's not that LSU can't run the football. It's that Joe Sloan doesn't attempt to run the football. It was a problem a year ago. It continues to be a problem this year. And it will continue to be a problem for as long as he's the offensive coordinator, because it's something he clearly does not want to try to emphasize, running the football. And you have to have a semblance of balance. I was doing a national interview before the game started. And the host asked me, what's the key to the game? I said, when the game's over, grab the box score, look at the rushing stat. That'll tell you the game. If LSU attempted to run the football. Well, Texas A&M ran for 224 yards. LSU ran for 60 yards. And that is why you have the score you did, with A&M beating LSU 49-25. So with that loss, major questions remain. What is left for the season? And what is left for the Brian Kelly era? I want to talk about that next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. I'd love to tell you about this week's moment that moved the game forward for LSU, but man, they're hard to come by, few and far between. Maybe we could talk about Harlem Berry, his 7-yard touchdown run, his explosive first half, or even another freshman, Jace Thomas, who had a block punt for a safety. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. And we're brought to you by DoorDash. The weekend is here. Time to look back, crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. So let's break it down. Again, we'll have to rely on the first half, but maybe Jace Thomas's block punt or Trey Green's touchdown or Harlem Berry's touchdown run in the first half. Those players delivered in a big way. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, that performance, especially for a guy like Trey Green, isn't a fluke. And just like those players delivered for the Tigers, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season. You could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. So LSU loses 49-25, and I think the question that everybody has now is this it for Brian Kelly? And it's a fair question. And it's a question that I've largely brushed aside up until this point because it's not realistic. And I'm still not sure it's realistic, but it's a fair conversation to have at this point because context matters. Losses happen. Losses literally happen to every team. A week ago, 7 top 25 teams lost, including 4 in the top 10. It's just going to happen. But when you look at this LSU football team, they came into this season all in with a 5th-year senior quarterback, leading returning passer in college football, $18 million spent on this roster. Brian Kelly's number. He volunteered that number, not me guessing. He said it on the record. You went in the portal. You had the number 1 transfer portal class. You had a schedule where you avoided back-to-back road conference games at any point. This was supposed to be an all-in year. It's why you were preseason top 10 in the country. This is a talented football team that is dramatically underperforming based on what realistic expectations exist. So naturally, people are going to ask about the future. I'm going to be very careful whenever I talk about Brian Kelly's future and contracts, buyouts, all that stuff, to make sure you're aware of when I'm talking about information that I've gotten and opinion, because there is a difference. So I want to be very clear when I'm giving you opinion and when I'm giving you information. A week ago, when LSU lost to Vanderbilt in Nashville, I had several phone conversations, and what was expressed to me, again, this is not, I want to be clear, not my opinion. This is what was expressed to me from people who would have effect on those conversations, was that there was no appetite to pay Brian Kelly's buyout, north of $50 million. And not only would you have to pay Kelly the buyout, but you'd have to buy out his staff and then hire a new coach and pay your roster. You're talking about $100 million. There was no appetite for that. The other thing that was expressed was the losses at the time to Ole Miss and to Vanderbilt were close road losses against top 10 teams. Ole Miss and Vanderbilt are both in the top 10. And so there was some perspective from in that context a week ago. Again, not my opinion, conversations I had. I wonder how much of that changes now, because this wasn't just a loss. This was a meltdown. This was an epic failure. With your season on the line at home against a rival, you got blasted 49-25. They outgained you 426-278. They outrushed you 224-60. Third down conversions, they were 70%, 7 of 10. You were 2 of 12 on third down. We can keep going. Over and over, we can keep going on what this game looked like. They had 7 sacks, 11 TFLs. 7 sacks, 11 TFLs, A&M's defense did. This was domination by Texas A&M. No other way to say it. There's no way around it. It's what it was. And with your season on the line, to have that type of performance is absolutely inexcusable. So do we start having those conversations more about Kelly's buyout? The thing a lot of people may not recognize is LSU just isn't one of those programs like Texas A&M or even Penn State that can afford to just callously stroke $50, $100 million checks. LSU's not a poverty program, but it's not wealthy in those terms. And it's why, from the moment they hired Brian Kelly and gave him this deal, I've said here and on every platform I'm on, that for better or worse, LSU and Brian Kelly are financially bound to one another for a decade. Now, I shout out to the everydayers. I mentioned this in an episode earlier this week. And I did mention, I got a hold of Brian Kelly's contract last week after the Vanderbilt game, and there is mitigation in that contract. So as to say, if LSU fired Brian Kelly and he got another job, his buyout would be lessened by the amount of his new contract. Also, his contract runs through 2031. It's a 10-year deal. So his buyout would be monthly installments through the duration of the contract. That makes it easier to pay it out over the next 6 years instead of all in a lump sum, right? So those things do exist. There's a couple of other things that I would tell you that I think are really impactful with respect to this conversation. Number one is the hierarchy in the state. And listen, this is who does the athletic director work for? The athletic director is hired by the president of the university, the board of supervisors, and ultimately the governor, ahead of who employs those people who work at the pleasure of the governor. Where you're going through right now a search at LSU for a new president of the university. And the board has been turned over by current governor Jeff Landry. And I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm not here to talk about RD, red, blue, any of that stuff. There's plenty of places we can have that conversation. Just understand that the governor and Scott Woodward are politically different. And the governor has made it known in no uncertain terms in certain circles that he doesn't like the way Scott Woodward spends in LSU athletics. Okay. Well, you're going through a process right now where you're about to hire a new president of the university for whom the athletic director will work, and that president will be influenced largely by the governor of the state. And you could see a world where Scott Woodward, as long as the football program continues to decline like this, Scott Woodward could be the one actually on the hot seat. And then in that case, does a new athletic director make a change? Again, I'm not pushing Scott Woodward out the door. I think Scott's done an amazing job. He hired Jay Johnson. He hired Kim Mulkey. Yes, he gave Brian Kelly this contract. And yes, he hired Matt McMahon as well. But I think part of men's basketball's problem has been the fact that they haven't invested in the roster. Different conversation, different day. I don't mean to confuse you with all this conversation. It's just to say that for all the conversation we're having about Brian Kelly, we probably need to be having a conversation about Scott Woodward, not because I think we need to, because the governor is making it pretty clear. By the way, an hour after the game, Governor Jeff Landry, on his personal Twitter account, took issue with the board approving ticket price increases for next year. I'm not sure if you saw this, but the LSU Board of Supervisors approved a ticket price raise for next season. This is a tweet from the governor. I think this was an hour after the game. I think LSU Sports and the LSU Board of Supervisors needs to rethink their actions to raise ticket prices next year after tonight's showing. The governor of the state of Louisiana is intervening in his opinions into LSU football matters. He did it a year ago with bringing the Tiger on the field against Alabama. It doesn't matter if you like him or love him or hate him or vote for him. It doesn't matter. I don't care. The fact of the matter is the governor ultimately appoints board members. The board members are the ones who are going to approve a new president. The president is the one that hires Scott Woodward, or that will be the Scott Woodward's boss, who ultimately hires Brian Kelly. So the point is, like, there's a trickle-down effect all the way throughout the state of Louisiana and the governmental hierarchy. So all of this matters. All of this matters in this conversation, as confusing as it may sound. So don't lose sight of that. The other part is you look at how bad it can get. And LSU's going into their open date, but then they're going to play at Alabama, where they're going to be an underdog. Then they're home against Arkansas and Western Kentucky, where they'll be a favorite and they should win. But then they're going to play at Oklahoma, where they're going to be an underdog. And if you finish the season 7-5, there's just no way you can go into 2026 with the status quo. There's going to be changes. And I don't know that it's Brian Kelly. Maybe it's staff. Maybe it's Joe Sloan. Maybe it's Brad Davis. But there will be some type of change that has to happen within this program going into 26. The other thing I'll mention, and I've said it before here, I'll say it again, and I'm not sharing information that I have. I'm being very clear. This is just my opinion, reading through this circumstance. Brian Kelly on Saturday, by the way, on his birthday, he turned 64. What a birthday present, getting waxed by Texas A&M. But Brian Kelly turned 64 on Saturday. He's also said on the record that part of the reason he never took the NFL jobs is he didn't like the whole idea of a general manager and buying a roster and all that stuff, which is the reality of college football. And this was an all chips to the middle of the table season. Garrett Nussmeier returning, $18 million, nearly 20 players in the portal, all that stuff. And after this year, you're losing Nuss. You're losing so many guys from this roster. I mean, just look at the seniors. Nuss, Josh Thompson, Aaron Anderson, Barian Brown, Xavier Thomas, Jamari Butler, Jack Pyburn, Patrick Payton, Bernard Gooden, West Weeks, AJ Halsey. You're going to lose, obviously, Mansour Delane to the draft. Like, you're losing this whole roster. Is Brian Kelly interested in a rebuild? It's a very fair question. So maybe you look at a situation where Brian Kelly retires and goes and does TV next year. Again, I don't have inside information. I'm not telling you that I know anything. But for a guy that's 64, who doesn't love this era of college football, who's having this massively disappointing season when they were all in and is looking at a rebuild, that might not be something he's interested in. And by the way, in his contract, if Brian Kelly were to step away, then LSU would not have to pay the buyout. Now, what would likely happen is they'd negotiate some type of settlement of that number and give him a lump sum and he'd leave. But again, I don't know if that's going to happen or that's something Brian Kelly would even be considering. But I think at this point, you consider everything and you believe nothing. And that's what we'll do. That's what I always do during the coaching carousel season. But one thing is for certain. What happened on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium is completely, wholly, totally unacceptable. And major changes need to happen within the LSU football program because losing is one thing. Losing at home in the manner in which you lost with everything on the line should never be acceptable at LSU. And that's something they got to fix. And I don't know that they can do it this season, but we'll be following it right here on Locked on LSU. Hey, thanks so much for making us your first listen. Do me a favor, please smash that like button if you're on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day.